Kia ora, I'm Calliope. And why am I here? Well, I'm the creative producer at StarCult, and I shipped... Oh, there's a little bit of lag. Is that normal? Yeah, we're good now? Okay, cool. And my biggest accomplishment in this industry is shipping a game last year, during COVID, on multiple platforms. If I was a knife, I'm this, trying to be a bit more like this, or maybe even like this. Just a quick note as well, I foolishly only gave myself 15 minutes because I planned this in 2020. So if you have any questions, the hashtag that you can use, and my DMs on Twitter are open. Please don't send me hate. So yeah, last year we at StarCult made Best Friend Forever, and right now we're working on something new and spooky and exciting that I can't yet talk about, but looks cool. So what do? I'm production plus. I do production, I do music and sound management, I do marketing, I do merch and logistics, I do trailer storyboarding, I do trailer terrible fake WikiHow art, I'm so sorry, and 3D art to support our artist Brianna, and on our new title, I'm also a game designer. So hopefully the title of this talk is starting to make a little bit more sense. Swiss Army knife. If you're interested in a longer talk about BFF, I highly recommend coming to my coworker and artist Brianna's talk tomorrow, which is going to go into much more depth about BFF's production. Just in case anyone needs a refresher, what's a producer? This is the OG quote from the 1980s, which I think is still pretty relevant today. But producers are all about their team, and this talk is all about you. And in order to explain what direction this talk is taking, I want to talk to you a little bit about survivorship bias. So the term survivorship bias comes from a problem in World War II, where engineers were analysing the most hit parts of the planes that were coming home to figure out where to add more armour. Abraham Wald, a Hungarian Jewish mathematician, made the point that they should actually be armouring the places that didn't have bullet holes, because those were the planes that weren't going home. In order to be Swiss Army producers ourselves, we need to be armouring ourselves against the bullets that are taking people off the playing field entirely, rather than exclusively looking at successful producers. We need to look at why producers leave games. So, no one asked, literally no one asked, but if I went to do some research, I thought that if I could decode why producers left games, I could figure out how to be a really good producer, which is one that can stick around and one that knows when things are going up shit creek. So I searched and I hunted through many reputable websites, and their logos are here, and I found out information about studio reviews, salaries, pay gaps, and anything that could give me a bit more information about why a producer would leave games. This included like how often we move around, what our average turnover is. It's about 5 years, by the way. We're a very high turnover industry. Our feelings about our salaries, and what makes us swap jobs or look for new work. And info about when we expected to be looking for new employment. So that was all information on people who were moving around in games, not people who've left games. Finding information on people who have actually left the industry completely was really, really difficult. But I needed to know, because they're the planes that didn't come back, and I wanted to know where those bullets were hitting. So I asked online. I spoke to multiple people in Discord groups and subreddits, and I also, lastly, begrudgingly took to Twitter as a last resort. If you're one of the people who responded to this, by the way, thank you so much. Your information, your stories were invaluable, and I really appreciated it. However, my DMs, across Discord and Twitter, I received a huge amount of personal stories, and people were recommending other people that they knew who'd left. I was getting DMs from all over the place. It was great. But obviously, because I'm a producer, I needed to put that data into a spreadsheet. So, here are the top reasons for leaving games for producers, not for any other discipline, that I could quantify as ticks rather than long personal stories. I honestly did make a really pretty pie chart first, but in this house, we listen to data analysts, so I've made an easy-to-read bar graph. I also want to mention that my sample size was really small. Again, it's really hard to find people who've left. And it's about under 30 people. I don't want to get too specific. In order to protect the people who spoke to me as well, I can't really give you any more information on demographics, which I admit does make this a little bit vague. All we've got is kind of years in the industry. But I think that we can still learn a lot from this data. So firstly, this is where it gets a bit tricky for us, and for me being like, hey producers, because it's like, there's not, what are we going to do with that? Most of these things are actually a bit hard for a producer to do anything about. So we can immediately take salary off the board, because this conversation is only 15 minutes long. So, unprofessionalism in the industry. This one depends. So the smaller the team, the more ability you have to enact change early. Encouraging a culture of professionalism at the workplace and in the way that we communicate with peers is hard, and depending on your circumstances, it's not always possible. But one of the main complaints was the night and day difference between people who worked in the game studio and then their experience working in literally any other industry afterwards. I believe that the majority of people who had responded had also worked in other industries first, and either had expectations of the game industry that weren't met, or experienced a much higher quality of work-life balance and workplace professionalism once they'd left games. It's not always up to us, but producers do often have some control over the standards that are set, if we're backed by management. Regardless of how you get there and how you define a professional workplace, it is one of the top reasons that producers leave, so don't sleep on it, do something about it. Burnout. Luckily, there's a whole talk on this. I strongly believe that crunch is actually more often than not a stakeholder issue rather than a production issue. Spicy. I know that this is based on the conversations that I have had with producers. We all know that crunch happens, but the best way to prevent it is to continue to plan ahead, continue to groom the backlog, and understand that being an agile company, even in games, does not mean changing the goals and features of your product. It means being agile about the ways that you get to that end goal. The outcome doesn't change, but the output does. Output-based planning is one of the greatest causes for burnout, so keep learning. Get a Scrum license. Understand the difference between a Kanban board and Kanban methodology. Get clued up on the various types of project management and find out which one works for you. Understand the lingo, and you'll find it a lot easier to defend your position and your team, the most important part, if you can argue from an ideological and methodology-based standpoint, rather than a standpoint based on your opinion or your intuition. Next, I'm going to cover a bunch here because I believe that they all kind of come under one umbrella, which is abusive management. So these were ones that included stories of basically disagreeing with a powerful person in the hierarchy and having no career options left except to leave. I also want to add that conflict is not abuse. The descriptions that I were given were clear abuses of power. This is a whole different talk as well, and not always something that we as producers can do about, unless we are the abusive management, in which case, get it together. Parenthood, this was actually really hard to read about. This was one that popped up more than I expected, and I shouldn't have been surprised. This disproportionately, of course, affects mums, but there was a couple of fathers who reached out too. The discrimination included not having a room or a private space to breastfeed or pump at work, and also discriminating against the capabilities of working parents, again, particularly mums, by demoting them or assuming that because they become a parent, they were less interested in their career. As a producer, regardless of whether or not you're planning on bringing some crotch goblins into the world, this is something that we can actually enact change upon. Yes, thank you, Lucy. Creating a studio culture that understands and accepts and celebrates parenthood as part of life. Advocate for a private space for mothers. Ensure parental leave is not interrupted. Ensure new parents don't mysteriously get made redundant. Yes, this is an actual story. I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. And plan out those key transition points around parental leave really carefully. There's a bunch of good resources out there on this topic as well, so don't wait till a staff member is expecting to plan them out. Also, as another note, when Google extended their parental leave from 12 weeks to 18, the resignation of new mothers dropped by 50%, which unsurprisingly saved the company millions in recruiting and training. I've also included reviews by Harvard Business Review and Forbes in the resource slide at the end, so we're rushing through this because again, 15 minutes, but all the data will be there at the end. So now we have a little bit more intel on why these people leave. How could we have changed those outcomes? What can we do with this information? How could we have kept these valuable, knowledgeable people in our industry? While there were several juniors in my sample size, there was a couple between the 1 to 2, 3 year period, we're actually missing out on vital experienced talent because the majority of them actually had 5 or 10 years experience in their field. That's a brain drain. So I asked them what they thought would have helped. And this is what the sample size reckons would have made a difference. So first up, we have discipline. Another symptom of an unprofessional workplace, the discipline point referred to the lack of keeping standards or metrics that were set either by production or the studio culture as a whole. This ties in with project management. Growth. Producers who left felt that they would be or had been stuck in the same position without professional development for years. This ties in with mentorship and community. Maternity room is fairly self-explanatory. Again, maternity room, private space. This is the first step to supporting parents in the workplace, and it's pretty basic, but it's a good start. Access to the community. It's been really hard to work around this one in COVID, I understand, but I've put my favourite online communities as links in the resource slide because there's a lot of great Discords, but there's one in particular that's a fantastic international Discord full of organised and engaged game producers. I go there whenever I need to double check something. One producer I spoke to said she simply didn't know enough game devs to ascertain whether what was happening at her workplace was common or normal, and she also felt that if she'd had access to a community, she might have spotted the absolute fire hazard of a studio that she was working at and gotten out earlier, or made some changes. Unfortunately, she left because of the abuse and burnout she received, and she's gone back to her old industry. Mentorship, such a big deal. This goes hand in hand with community, but it needed its own category because of how important people felt about it. In smaller studios, like Starcult, it's often hard to tell if you're doing the right thing if there's no one more senior than you in your specific role to give you feedback so that you can grow. Mentors are absolutely essential to giving us peace of mind and growth strategies. If you're a mentor, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you, and I also am forever grateful to two really important mentors that I had within my first year. Diversity. So obviously we could talk all day about why diversity is a good, important, and necessary thing. But diversity in upper management, whether that's stakeholders or in-house management, may have prevented the loss of some very knowledgeable people who felt that they were siloed out because of their gender, ethnicity, sexuality, ability, you name it. Diversity from the top is a really good start to remove those blockades and ensure that there's a range of perspectives and experiences at the table. Good project management practices. I believe in these cases the producer felt that there was too much resistance against proper project management practices. The pushback usually comes from creatives, but sometimes also as producers we're at fault for simply not knowing enough about project management. We know a lot about games, but that doesn't mean that we're equipped to manage expensive tech projects, and that's what games are. So keep learning, keep reading. You can do an entire degree just on project management, so there's absolutely no reason why we should slow down on learning when the rest of the team is constantly learning about new tech. What was the point of any of this? Why am I telling you these things, and how is this going to make you better at your job? Because this turns into this. And this, these areas without the obvious bullet holes and the planes that don't come back, they become this when they get hit. Sorry about the cheesy slides, I couldn't help myself. We need to focus on these areas sooner rather than later. So a Swiss Army producer, in my opinion, is someone who can foresee these things and has the brain space to plan ahead to act on them early, something that can get completely overwhelmed if we're too busy being stressed or distracted by literally all of the issues that I've just laid out up until this point. Organisation plays a huge role here too, so taking organisation to the next level is really important. So because it's a production talk, I would like to show you how I take the stuff out of my headspace. These are my tools. These are the ones that I use and I rate highly. This is by no means a comprehensive list. Being super organised is like my main way of keeping from overwhelm. And I wish I could just give you one production tool and be like, this is the good tool to use, and that's everything, but we're way off from that, and I still use all of these. So Jira for project management. Best Friend Forever was produced with Asana, but the lack of adequate reporting mechanisms and just sort of long-term larger projects and also managing multiple projects at once meant that we moved over to Jira, and I much, much prefer it. Oh, how do I go back? Got it. Notion for RGDD, Staff Wiki and more. So Notion's really, really great, actually, and it's amazing for all of our live documents in particular. Slack for communications, pretty standard. Slack add-ons I wanted to quickly mention. We have Cloverpop, which is my newest, latest, and most favorite add-on. So Cloverpop is decision tracking, and it just means that whenever you make a decision, like how often have you had a conversation and been like, yeah, we're going to do this, and then you walk away, and either you both have completely different ideas of what, this was, or you know, 3 months down the line, you're looking through a design document, and you're like, why is it like this? Why do we decide this? This makes no sense. Let's change it. So Cloverpop's really good because it tracks all of the decisions in Slack, and then you have a nice list of all of the decisions that you've ever made, who they were by, what the reasons were for, etc. It's great. Gcal and Jira to do quick task adding, etc. on the fly, and also to remind you to go to meetings. Jibble for time tracking, G Suite for email, docs, spreadsheets, and Miro for narrative planning. This is my resource slide. I'm going to post this on Twitter with the links because you can't click on here. But basically, we've got those notes on Parenthood in the workplace. These are really, really great community resources and Discord groups. Either I can give you an invite or you can approach the person that I have tagged there. And for upskilling, we've got scrum.org for great project management quizzes and certification, etc. Recommended readings and talks, which I'll also post on Twitter. And the Project Management Body of Knowledge, which is an amazing book that I haven't quite gone through yet, but I recommend it. And that's me. Sorry this was so short. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that helps some people.
Thank you so much for your insightful talk, Calliope. Much appreciated. Now, our next speaker will have a moment for a Q&A, so please, if you have any questions,